Okay, so now going back to our goals for today. So far you covered, we went over the homework and you reported on what you did in the discussion yesterday about genres. So now we're going to actually go over what are different genres in a PPT. And so this should take about 15 minutes, and I want the time manager, Simon, to make sure that we don't go over more than 15 minutes, okay? So, and then after that, you're going to go into like an investigation of text, right? So I want you to see, can you find out which kind of story is this? I won't give you the name, I won't give you the whole story, but can you read a small part of the story and tell me, oh, this is a historical fiction, or oh, this is a mystery story, okay? So, yesterday we talked about how we have an MYP curriculum, right? And every unit we have a unit question. So our question today is on the board. Who can read it? Jason?
How can reading different texts help you understand yourself and relate to the world around you?
What does that mean? What do you think, Jason? So do you understand text?
No.
Text is a story, an essay, something in written form, in a book, online.
Like some books are talking about how the city made up, like who invent, like who designed.
So you're saying some stories talk about
the history,
and the history is about people, right? So you're trying to explain the world part, right?
Yeah.
So anybody else have an idea? Because this is a question we're going to think about the whole time we're doing this unit. Austin?
We can get different information from each book.
So what kind of information can you get? Just science information or?
Everything.
Everything, right? So some books can tell you about people's life. Like a story, one book can just be about a girl and her family. Or a science fiction book could be about technology or how science says the future, right? So that's understanding the world around you just by reading a story. So that's what I want us to try to do. How different types of stories help us to know yourself, right? So am I like the character in the story? Am I like Harry Potter? No, or I'm not like Harry Potter at all. I'm very different from him, okay? And what about the world Harry Potter lives in? Is it similar to my life at Genside? No, or is it very different? So that's what we're going to think about. So now we're going to do a PowerPoint on genres. I want you to pay attention to the questions on the PowerPoint. So don't just listen to me talk. After I talk about something, there'll be a question on the slide, and I want you to help me answer. And in the end, you should answer the big question. How many genres did Ms. Hollis introduce to you? Okay? So, let's open up the PowerPoint.
Sure, the record cannot see the PPT.
Oh, that's okay. So that's why yesterday I had you talk about the different genres by yourself to see what you already know. Now, let's try to cover some facts about each literary genre. Okay, so we said genre can be for what else? Just books?
No.
What else?
Magazines.
Magazines? Internet?
Electronic device.
Movies?
Oh.
Right? What else?
Electronic device.
No? Movies? So what kind of movies can you watch? An action movie?
Mystery.
A mystery movie?
Fantasy.
Movie? What about music?
Oh.
Do we have different kinds of music? Like what?
Pop.
Pop?
J-pop.
J-pop? What's J-pop?
Japanese pop.
Japanese pop, okay. What other kind of music do we have?
Korean pop.
Simon, what kind of music do you listen to?
Piano.
You don't listen to any music? So you listen to silence, okay? What kind of music do you listen to, Jason?
Piano.
K-pop or
K-pop?
yeah, or
And what's K-pop?
K-pop is Korean pop.
Korean pop? What else?
Or other sounds.
Other music like
Classic.
classic. What's classic music?
Piano, violin,
It has a piano, violin. Okay, is it the same as K-pop?
No.
What does K-pop have?
It has many rhythms.
Has a lot of rhythms. Is it fast or slow?
Fast.
Does it have singing?
Yeah.
So we can see that this different type of music has different characteristics, right? Classical, Sophie says it's violin, piano, trumpets. Does it have singing? No. Very sometimes, right? Very rarely has some singing. So same thing for books. You can tell, okay, I'm reading a mystery because it has this. Or I'm reading a romance because it has this. Okay, so that's what the word genre means. It's just not for books. Okay, so the first, we just talked about, a genre is a type of story. We just talked about it's a type of something. And there are many different types of genres, even for movies. So my question is, what genres for literature do you know? Donald. Sci-fi? Christopher.
Fiction.
Fiction? Shion? Science? Like science fiction? What about you, Oscar? What type of book do you know? You told me Narnia was a book you like. What kind of book is Narnia?
Fantasy.
Fantasy, right? And Jason?
Biography.
Biography. Very good. So let's continue. The first one we're going to talk about is realistic fiction. So I know you know fiction and nonfiction. But now we have different types of fiction. Realistic fiction is a story that could really happen. Right? Sometimes you can read a story, it's just too crazy. Right?
Time machine.
A time machine came to my house and ate my sister. And then my mom said, hey, time machine, how you doing? Like, that doesn't happen every day, right? But some stories are about everyday life, right? Do you know any stories like that? That's a PPT question. Can you name a realistic fiction book? Donald?
Secret Garden.
Say that again.
Secret Garden.
Secret Garden, is it realistic? Okay, it has some realistic parts.
Charlie
Like
and the
what?
Chocolate Factory.
There's, what's realistic about the Secret Garden?
The people is not very weird.
They're not weird. They're normal people, you would think. A
Yeah.
girl, right? She lives in a house.
And then the big houses could be all possible.
Right, it could all be possible for a girl to live in a big
Or
mansion.
chocolate, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
You can go inside the factory and
Some parts are realistic,
Yeah.
right? He has a family. What part is not realistic?
the fat.
The
Elevator.
elevator, right? You can fly through the air. So it's not all the way realistic fiction, but you get the idea. Okay, so here are my examples. I have Holes. Does anybody know this book? It's also a movie. Holes is about a detention camp. Do you know a detention camp? None of you will go there. But if you're a young person and you're being bad a lot, they can't send you to jail, right? But they send you to detention camp. And in this detention camp, they dig holes in the hot desert. And this was a very popular movie, I think in 2008. And if we choose to read this book, we can also maybe watch the film. Okay, so Holes is one. And a lot of books like Crash is called Coming to Age. Like someone growing up, right? About a story about someone growing up in middle school or in high school is coming to age story. Okay, those are a lot of realistic fiction. Okay, now we have historical fiction. What do you think historical fiction is about? History.
Time and place.
Right,
Certain
so it's
place.
a certain time and place. 1992, 1800, 11th century. It's telling you a specific time, okay? And most of the time, they might have a realistic historical figure in the book. Not always, but most of the time. Have you seen the movie Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer?
Oh yeah.
What?
Oh, what?
Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer.
Yeah,
It's a movie, it's not a book. But it's about Abraham Lincoln. Is this a real historical figure? Who is he? Or was he? He was an American president, right? Long ago. Does he slay vampires?
Oh.
No. But they picked a time and a place, and they put Abraham Lincoln. So this is some idea of a historical fiction in the form of a movie. So can you think of one historical fiction? Have you read any or heard of any? Doesn't have to be in English. Hunger Games? Not so much. I know if you think about Chinese movies, what are a lot of famous Chinese movies about?
I know Chinese movie.
About,
Three
say that again, Simon? The Three Kingdoms, right? What is that about?
Fighting together.
Fighting. So a lot of historical fiction might be about
Fighting.
how do countries fight? Three-letter word. W, A, war, right? So a lot of historical fiction might have war. And a lot of Chinese movies are about some type of war and a very strong hero, right? Like Three Kingdoms, okay? So if you, that's a good example, or some Chinese films or Chinese books, okay? So I have one book is called The Ties That Bind, Ties That Break. It is about Chinese culture. It is about a period of time where Chinese women used to do foot binding. Do you know foot binding?
Oh.
When they would, this is their foot, the young girl would slowly fold her foot and wrap it so that her foot would be small, just like this. So this was not a real girl, but it's a real time. It's a real point in history for China, right? And the Titanic crossing took parts of what happened in Titanic, but they added to make it more exciting, right? Okay, so you know the Titanic, the boat that crashed, okay? And Across 5 Aprils is a war story. It has a cannon there, and it's about a boy growing up during the war, okay? So now we have another one called folklore. Folklore. Can you say folklore? I like that word, folklore. So folklore are myths or fables. And I like to think of myths and fables as a story to teach you a lesson, right? They usually have animals in them. And at the end of this story, you'll like, oh, I shouldn't lie anymore. Oh, I shouldn't be greedy. Oh, I shouldn't want to be the fastest person, right? So, can you think of any stories like that? The turtle and the rabbit, I have it on the PPT. Or the tortoise and the hare, right? It taught you what? Slow and steady wins the race. You don't have to run so quickly at the beginning. As long as you keep trying, you should win the race, right? So time manager, how much time do we have left for our PPT lesson? 5 minutes. Okay, so after the PPT lesson.
What? 11 years. 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock.
11:05.
I am going to crash my.
It's okay. Time manager, 5 minutes. Okay, so remember after the PPT, you will do the investigation.
Oh, Aesop Fables.
That is after the break, okay? So, Aesop Fables is an example, very good. And Cinderella, you learn about, you know, it's not about the one with the most money, the most beautiful clothes, who gets the prince. And Beauty and the Beast, you know?
Yeah.
The most handsome
Romantic.
man can be handsome inside, right? He was very kind, but no one knew it because they didn't trust his face,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
His fables.
So this is very popular with children, folklore. Fantasy. This is what the example that Oscar gave me, right? So fantasy is fiction, and it has a lot of magical parts to it, right? And there's sometimes a struggle between the good and the evil powers, right? So can you think of a fantasy novel? Harry Potter, very famous fantasy novel. What about
Narnia.
Narnia. Spider-Man, is that fantasy?
Maybe it's realistic.
No.
Spider-Man and Batman is not.
Spider-Man, he becomes a spider, how?
The spider.
Inspired by.
So it's not fantasy.
He's bitten by a spider, right? And there's a scientist, a lot of scientists in the movie or in the book too, right? So it should be a science fiction. But you know, Harry Potter and Narnia, those are fantasy novels. And I have Alice in Wonderland, very classic story, right? She follows a rabbit, she falls down a hole, she shrinks, she gets bigger, right? It's a lot of magic involved, invisible cats, and the Chronicles of Narnia, you name that, and Harry Potter, okay? This is very popular with middle school students, and we will read some. Mystery. You have to solve, Shion said, you have to solve some problem, an accident, right? You have to figure out who did it. It has clues also, okay? So, name a mystery book.
007.
007? Okay, that's supposed to be a movie. Sherlock Holmes is very popular. What about, did you say one, Christopher? Do you know Sherlock Holmes?
Two
He's
guys.
a detective. So who's a detective? It's like a police officer, right? He's trying to figure out what happened and who did it. And he's following the clues. Here's a famous image of what Sherlock Holmes should look like. And I have the example for Sherlock Holmes also on the PPT. And the Boxcar Children is a famous book series that was when I was a kid. They have, it's all mystery stories. So many, hundreds and hundreds of mystery stories, okay? Okay, and finally we have science fiction. And Simon told us science fiction has a lot of time, going back and forth in time, aliens, technology is the key.
Doraemon.
Technology, okay? Science words, okay? So Star Wars, they have laser beams and spaceships, right? That's technology.
Nice.
A lot of people confuse this with fantasy, but make sure you're looking for the technology part and you'll say, this is science fiction. So name one science fiction. Doraemon. My 8th grader said the same thing. They said he has a science in his stomach.
Iron Man. Iron Man.
Iron Man, right? Star Wars is very famous. So I had Star Wars, The Invisible Man. He's the result of a science project. He becomes invisible, and what does he do now? And A Wrinkle in Time is a time travel story, Simon. And this is your favorite, I know, poetry. Poetry. Poetry is a verse, right? It's about feelings, and they rhyme. It's not as long as a story, right? Sometimes short, sometimes long. So, do you know any poems? I know you're in middle school. Maybe you don't know so many poems. Do you know one poem?
I don't think so. I write.
Doesn't have to be in English.
I don't read poems.
No poems?
No.
You ever read a poem?
Maybe you
No. I write.
Maybe you just know. You're just not here. You write poems.
Yeah.
Okay. Time editor. You didn't tell me we had our time is up. Okay. We'll wait for the bell. Okay, so I'm going to give you your break. We're going to finish the PowerPoint and you will do your investigation, okay? Please have a break.